10 o'clock, I'm Chris Coles. More than 4,000 people who were given contaminated blood should receive compensation. A judge heading an inquiry into the scandal has recommended. At least 2,400 people died after contracting HIV or hepatitis C through NHS treatments in the 1970s and 80s. Sir Brian Langstaff said surviving victims and bereaved partners should be given an interim payment of £100,000 each.
Sir Robert Francis QC recommended interim payments because the payment of full compensation could not be delivered quickly. He made a compelling case that interim payments are needed now to alleviate further suffering, and I agree with him.
Sue Gorman, who lost her husband Steve in 2018, says the government must act on the recommendations.
I had my earning power taken away from me. My husband had his earning power taken away from me. We lost our home, we lost, everything we had. Why shouldn't I financially, because that's the only thing the government can now give me, have some part of what I lost?
More than 4,000 people who were given contaminated blood should receive compensation, the chairman heading an inquiry into the scandal has recommended. At least 2,400 people died after contracting HIV or hepatitis C through NHS treatments in the 1970s and 80s. Sir Brian Langstaff has urged the government to pay an interim amount of £100,000 to surviving victims and bereaved partners. Des Collins is a solicitor representing around 1,500 of the victims. He says the payments should be made straight away.
Matt Hancock, when he was Health Secretary last summer, appeared before the inquiry. He was quite adamant that if at any stage compensation was recommended by the inquiry, that the government would pay it. Now, we'll be back out there on Monday morning to try and put as much pressure as we can on the government to make that payment immediately. And when I say immediately, I don't mean within 3 months, I mean immediately.
Surviving victims of the infected blood scandal have seen a significant moment today in their fight for justice. A judge has said more than 4,000 people should now receive provisional compensation of £100,000. The chairman of the public inquiry, Sir Brian Langstaff, said there was a compelling case to make the payments quickly. At least 2,400 people died after contracting HIV or hepatitis C through NHS treatments in the 70s and 80s. One of those people who was given contaminated blood is Neil Weller, who is with me now. Good evening, Neil.
Hi, Stephen. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. And behind this story of compensation, Neil, is, of course, stories like yours of what happened to you. Can you bring me back and tell me?
Well, the fact is we've never had a single penny of compensation in 30 years of being infected. Now, I'm a haemophiliac myself, and I unfortunately was infected with hepatitis C during the late 70s, early 80s. And
how old were you?
It's impossible to say this. I was receiving so much treatment. There's a lot of ambiguity there that I was eventually told around about 1993 that I had.
Well, how old were you then when you were told?
I was only in my early 20s, 22 I believe. That I had
Devastating then.
The thing non-A, non-B, and now they had a test for something called hepatitis C. Now, along that time, I've just probably seen about 4 of my friends just die of HIV. I was in and out of hospital all the time. I wasn't one of the children that sat on the side of the fence and saw his friends played football and just sit there. I was there. I was mucking in. I was rushed into hospital. I'm sorry. I was a naughty one, but unfortunately, I spent a lot of time with other haemophiliacs who were naughty too, and we were suffering with a lot of haemophilia pain. And while being treated with that, we were treated with the blood that was meant to help us, but in fact, it didn't help us.
And how much did this change your life? Your physical and your psychological life?
The haemophilia is a real horrible, nasty disease. You probably know, Queen Victoria was a carrier, and it was known as a royal disease because Leopold and the Russian Tsars suffered as well. Or was it Nikolai? I get confused sometimes. So there was a lot of history there, and up until the late 1960s, the treatments were vast. So then there was a super drug called Factor 8 that came along, which was meant to help us. It was this clotting agent that we were born without. It was meant to help us, and the doctors jumped through hoops, and it was miracles. We had the perfect drug, but unfortunately, it was slightly tainted because, as you know, it's now proven to be a fact that we had bugs in it that was HIV and hepatitis C, and also there's no new variant CJD2.
Do you feel angry that you've had to wait so long for compensation? I personally felt I had a lot of survivor's guilt at some point. If you want to, did you?
Delve into my, because I survived hepatitis. So I survived the HIV scenario, and a lot of my friends were suffering from that, and that was my main feeling. But once I was over that, I don't think there's never been anger. It's more been kind of anguish or frustration, if I'm honest. Mind you, you speak to many of my other haemophiliac comrades, they've got a lot of anger, but myself, I've just got a lot of frustration and just, torment, to be honest.
But money helps, doesn't it?
Money
it doesn't. Yeah.
But I was putting this, if I'm being so kind, it's not all been about the money. It's, trust me, you speak to every one of us that's been following the wanting justice for the last 30 years. It's proven a wrong, a right, and that's all it amounts.
Why do you think it's taken so long?
Well, I only need to point one direction to Jeremy Hunt's evidence this week. There's so many lines that certain cabinets and when you write, let me just give you an example. If you write a letter to a government minister, it doesn't get answered by a government minister. There's a line. And there's like 3 lines you must get through. And the only people that can write to the Cabinet Secretary of Health is the people that are either top of the, other members of the top line of government. So there's a lot of bureaucracy involved. So we've been campaigning for years and years and years, and it's been confirmed this week in Jeremy Hunt's evidence that, he never saw letters that were written to him because other secretaries of state were writing on his behalf. And that's how it's been. We've been banging our heads against it's like a Berlin Wall, one of my fellow haemophiliacs are saying. We've just been not getting through, and we've just been swept under the carpet for the last 30 years.
That's how you feel? Swept under the carpet?
Oh, more than that. Kicked on the long grass, kicked on the ghoulies, you name it. We've found it all, my friend. Yeah, we've certainly, like I say, we've lost, not me, but I've lost friends, but you've got people that have lost husbands, you've got people that have lost sons, partners, wives. It's you go through the root and branch of it. It's not just, everyone's lost so many people in this. And like I say, it's 4,000 people that have died in this. It's hard. Sorry, it's 2,600 people. It's 4,000 people that have suffered, and that's a lot of plane crashes, isn't it?
Thank you for sharing your story with me tonight, sir. Thank you very much indeed.
No problem at all. Anytime.
Thank you. Good night. We'll hear from another victim after midnight this evening. It's 1:45. Now, more than 4,000 surviving victims of the contaminated blood scandal should receive provisional compensation of £100,000, a judge has said. The chairman of the Infected Blood Public Inquiry, Sir Brian Langstaff, said there was a compelling case to make the payments quickly. At least 2,400 people died after contracting HIV or hepatitis C through NHS treatments in the 70s and 80s. The government has said it would urgently consider any recommendations. Bev Tumelty lost her 2 haemophiliac brothers who contracted HIV and hepatitis C from infected blood transfusions and died within 6 months of each other, aged 52 and 53. I asked her when her brothers first got infected.
When they got infected and when they found out they were infected are really the start of the story. So our suspicions are late 70s, early 80s, but there was a delay in clinicians telling them that they were infected, firstly with HIV and then subsequently with hepatitis C. They knew about it. There's documentation in their medical notes that the clinicians knew way before patients were told of their infections.
And how quickly did they get ill, Bev? What happened to them physically?
So physically, they were offered no treatment initially, as in, their infection titer in the blood wasn't deemed that threatening. And then in the early days of HIV treatment, it was massive doses of AZT the patients were given, which we sort of later found out that it was those massive doses of AZT that was making patients very ill and dying. It wasn't actually the HIV. So until later dates when combination therapy of antivirals and that came into being, that treatment was more stable for them. So they, had ups and downs really of infections of varying types, pneumonias and things. They caught other infections very easily. And it was a bit of a tightrope they walked until combination therapy came into being, which was, much later. When they were initially diagnosed, it was, what they thought was a death sentence. They thought they would be, dead within a year or so, really.
What were they told at the time?
So initially, they were told you have some blood-borne virus. We don't know how you got it. We're not sure where it came from, but literally like a load of haemophiliacs were called into the Cardiff Haemophilia Centre and all told on the same day, you have this virus in your blood. We're not sure what it was initially. Then it became known as, HIV. And then that's when they were told, it's a life-limiting illness at that time. Whereas, nowadays HIV is more of a chronic illness and is managed very well on antiviral therapy. But back then it was, considered a death sentence.
And how did this affect their lives?
Massively. It definitely. Hayden, who's my elder brother, was, young and married with 2 little boys. So they very much struggled in the early days. One, with almost the shame of the infection, because lots of people were saying it was caused by sexual activity and it wasn't this blood-borne treatment that we now know it to be. It was horrible for them. They struggled and, didn't really want to tell anyone other than very close family. Gareth, my other brother, definitely struggled with mental health. His first marriage broke up as a direct consequence of how his, mental health impacted on that marriage. And they were told not to, try for children, as they didn't know if HIV could be passed on. So his first marriage broke up. And then he got married again at a later date, and I think that marriage was directly impacted as well. He was up and down with his treatment therapy, so he would become very ill. He ended up with PCP, which is a pneumonia type thing that you can get with HIV, which is very debilitating. And then his second marriage broke up as well. And he was, not with anybody at the time that he died. He didn't have a partner when he died.
So, died a lonely man?
lonely. We had family. I mean, he was actually on holiday with us. We were away in Spain together visiting my other brother, Mark. And we went over there just before Christmas, and he collapsed and died very suddenly. He had a massive brain hemorrhage about midday, and he was pronounced dead by 8:15 that same evening. There was literally nothing they could do for him. It was not pleasant at all, no. But no, lots of friends, kept himself busy, was involved in lots of charity work, and he worked for a charity, AB Plus, when he died up in Birmingham. He did lots of work for them, lots of campaigning. So he wasn't a lonely person. He just, didn't have a partner when he died, no.
And 4,000 surviving victims should now receive provisional compensation of £100,000. This is what a judge has instructed. Both of your brothers never saw a penny of compensation, of course.
No, and, they wouldn't. And that was, lots of their campaigning wasn't about money. It was about truth-seeking and justice, and, to get the story told, really, was what they were interested in. Hayden, did want his family provided for after his death, most definitely worried about his wife and sons. And it is a difficult time. And when Brian Langstaff has, instructed, because he can't order the government to make these payments, he can, highly recommend Robert Francis's report, but we remain waiting again. So, my sister-in-law would be eligible for the payment should it happen. But lots of people have been left out. I'm thinking of, parents who have lost children. I think they've included bereaved spouses in the recommendation, which is great. That's another section that they're going to include. But again, we wait and see if these payments will happen. It's still, very much up in the air. And, Parliament is in recess at the moment. I am quietly optimistic because you have to be. This campaigning has gone on, so many years now. So many years. I wasn't directly involved prior to my brother's deaths. I sort of, after they died then, there was, a bit of wilderness years where I didn't quite know what to do, and then, started meeting up with some of the others and getting more involved in the campaigning and with Haemophilia Wales and everything. And, that's where we are now. Yeah, so we always remain quietly optimistic, and we hope that all the different sections of the infected and affected community will be considered. But again, it's not, for me, it definitely isn't about money. It's about finishing what my brother started as campaigners. And I know there was that semblance of an apology in Parliament, which was about, 2 minutes long. I'd like to see more of a very public, proper statement about who was responsible and, naming of individuals as well who got rid of evidence or who altered medical reports or lost medical reports. I know for, my brother's notes, Gareth's, there was so much stuff missing from his medical notes when we obtained them, and no documentation of any conversations with regard to telling him he had HIV or Hep C. Lots of things missing from medical notes, definitely.
So you don't think the apology was enough? And you want a bigger apology?
And just to name, certain people who actively try to brush this under the carpet, and who, never quite believed the enormity of it, and because it's massive.
Well, listen, thank you very much indeed for talking to us tonight and for sharing your story, Bev. Thank you.